The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining our presentation on how to get an international student loan. My name is Jennifer Frankel, and I'm the Director of Financial Services. I am pleased to be joined by Brianna Davis and Victoria Truppi, who are both marketing coordinators here at International Student Loan. We are excited that you've decided to join our conversation, as we will be providing you with a complete overview of the international student loan process. But before we get started, I want to take this time to let you know that we'll be answering your questions at the very end of this presentation. Use the chat window on the right throughout this presentation to get your questions in so that we have time to answer them at the very end. You can also join the conversation at #FinancialAidTalk, which you can see at the bottom of the screen, or our handle, International Student Loans, on Twitter. After this presentation, we'll be adding additional resources on our Facebook and Google Plus account, so be sure to check it out. So with that, let's get started. To give you a roadmap of today's conversation, we'll begin by talking more about what is a student loan and how this should fit into your overall financial aid package. Next, we'll talk about the requirements of a student loan before you even apply. Then we'll discuss the entire student loan process from start to finish. And finally, we'll take your questions at the very end. Before we dive into details, though, first it's important to know what is a student loan. Unlike scholarships, grants, and fellowships, which award money without the obligation to pay the money back, a student loan is when you borrow money for a certain period of time, after which you pay the principal back, plus a cost to borrow that money, which we refer to as interest. There are two types of student loans. The first one is federal loans, and you may have heard of Stafford loans, for example. Unfortunately, international students aren't eligible for these federal loans. But the good news is that they are eligible for private student loans. These private student loans are typically done through banks and can be issued at any time throughout the year. So for example, if you are starting the semester, or even if you have an interruption of funds, let's say a family member no longer is able to financially support you, this can help. You can borrow up to the total cost of your education minus any financial aid you've received, such as scholarships, for example. Before choosing your loan, be sure to review and understand the terms and conditions. This can be really difficult, especially with a lot of jargon. So we have a resource section on international student loan where you can review the different terms. But the major ones are, for example, interest rate, which, as I mentioned, is the cost of borrowing money. The lower your interest rate, the lower your costs. Next is the repayment period, which is the amount of time it takes to pay the money back. There is also the deferral period, which is when you actually start making the payments. It could be right away, or it could be after your graduation. Be sure to think about each of these and think about them wisely, as both of these options, whether it's repayment or the deferral period, will influence your cost of borrowing. Obviously, the longer it takes to pay back the loan, the more costly it can be. The good news is that once you apply, you will get initial approval within 2 to 6 weeks. Remember, international student loans are a great way to help cover your educational fees. Be sure to first maximize the money you don't have to pay back, such as scholarships, fellowships, and other awards. Then you can cover the rest of those costs with your own savings or help from family members, such as your parents or distant relatives. If there's still a gap after both of these categories, then you can apply for international student loans to cover the rest. So once you're ready to apply, it's important to make sure you have all the needed check marks for your application. I'm going to turn it over to Brianna Davis, and she's going to talk more about the requirements for international student loans.
Thank you, Jennifer. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at a few of the requirements that you'll need to have met in order to apply for an international student loan. So the very first one is going to be a cosigner. Now, since most international students coming to the U.S. typically don't have established credit, a cosigner is going to be needed, and it's also required. Now, although this might seem like a hurdle, it's actually a good thing for you because a cosigner is essentially joining the loan application, which means that their credit will help you to be approved and to get the best interest rate possible. Now, whenever you get the best interest rate possible, then this means less money that you have to pay back later on. So that's good news for you. Now, there are a few things that co-signers do need to meet whenever it comes to if they're eligible to be a co-signer. And those are that they must be a U.S. citizen or permanent resident who has lived inside of the U.S. for the past 2 years and that they have good credit history. So they must have all 3 of those items met. Now keep in mind that the credit history criteria is going to vary by each lender. So you'll want to make sure that you try to find a co-signer with as good of a credit history as possible. Now if you're a U.S. citizen here, then you actually, a co-signer is not required. So you don't have to have a co-signer in order to apply. However, it's typically a good idea to still try and find a co-signer. That way, once again, you as well will be approved for an international student loan and then get the best interest rate possible. Now, something else that you'll need in many cases is going to be a Social Security number. If you do not have a Social Security number and you're going through the online application for a loan, something that you can do is give the lender a call and see if they have a paper application that does not require the Social Security number. And this might be a way around having to have a Social Security number in order to apply for an international student loan. So now that you know you need a co-signer, let's go ahead and take a look at who exactly is appropriate to ask to be a co-signer, because this is often one of the major hurdles for international students trying to get a loan, is they don't have a co-signer and they're not quite sure who to ask to be one for them. So a few good individuals to ask, first of all, will be family members and friends. A few individuals that you don't want to ask include individuals at random businesses that you've worked with in the past, anyone at your school, such as an international student advisor or your professors, and then anyone else that you don't really know too well. Typically, a good rule of thumb is that if you weren't willing to lend them a large sum of money, then it's probably not a good idea to ask them to be your co-signer. So once you've found a co-signer, it's then time to find a lender. So an important thing to know, first of all, is that not every lender is going to work with every school, and not every lender is going to work with international students. So you'll first have to find a lender that will work with the school that you plan on attending, and that also will lend to international students. Now, instead of searching for hours on end on the internet, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Victoria Truppi, and she's going to go ahead and tell you a bit more further in depth on how you can go ahead and search for lenders and compare to find the best one that meets your needs.
Thanks, Brianna. So how do you actually apply for an international student loan? Well, after you've found a co-signer and been accepted for admittance into the college of your choice in the U.S., that's when you should be ready to apply for the international student loan. And what we've actually done at internationalstudentloan.com is we've put together the first ever student loan comparison tool, which shows you, depending on your school, what lenders are available and allows you to apply for the loan right from the website. So it's a really good tool to use, and it's kind of a one-stop shop to see what your options are. So, and it's easy to use, 4 simple steps, as you can see here on the screen, and I'm going to go ahead and walk you through it on the actual website. So here we are. This is www.internationalstudentloan.com. And it shows you, it tells you exactly what to do here in the green boxes. So all you need to do first is choose, are you a U.S. citizen or permanent resident? If you're an international student studying in the U.S., we'll choose no. Do you have a U.S. cosigner? And as Brianna told you, you will need one in order to actually get a student loan. So for this question, you should be answering yes. Then you'll choose the state of the school that you've been accepted to. For example, we'll choose Florida here. Then you'll choose the name of your school. So for example, All of these schools are schools in Florida, so you'll just scroll down until you find yours. And for our example, we're going to use the University of Florida. And then it will ask you for an email address, so we'll put one in, for example. There we go, just for a test. And then we're just going to click on Find My Student Loan right here, the big green button. Simply click there and give it a minute to load. And this is going to show you all of the lenders that are lending to international students at your school specifically. The different lenders here that are shown will be different depending on the school that you're attending. And more lenders show up at different times, so be sure to check back with us as often as you can to see if new lenders are lending for your school. So do it every couple of months if you can. Now, after you've used the tool, you see the lenders that are available to you. There may be one choice, there may be 4 or 5 different lenders. So you can read through each of them, see which one is going to work best for you, and then simply click on the Apply Now button here in red. From there, you can do the entire application online. You can borrow up to the full cost of your education minus any other aid that you've received, like scholarships, as we mentioned before. So after you've done that, that's kind of the hard part, and that actually really gets you started and on your way to your international student loan. So what happens after that? It's a pretty, you've done the hard part, so this part's a little bit easier. First, you'll get an initial approval. Sometimes it's within about 48 hours, sometimes it can take up to 2 weeks, but you'll receive that probably by email, letting you know whether or not you're automatically eligible. And then you'll be asked to complete some additional documentation. Sometimes this includes a truth in lending disclosure, which is required by law. And then, once you're approved for the loan, you'll need to finalize the loan by signing a self-certification form and a master promissory note, which will be sent to you directly from your lender. And then your school will need to certify the loan. You won't need to do anything for this step. Your lender will communicate with your school specifically to certify that loan and make sure that the funds are distributed to them to pay for your tuition and fees, and then any additional amount will be sent to you from the school specifically. You should contact your school financial aid office for questions about timing of the disbursement, when you can expect your money, etc. So that's a quick overview of our student loan comparison tool, and we hope that you're able to go on there and use it as soon as possible. In conclusion, we just wanted to let you guys know that a student loan can help you fund your education even if you're an international student. And there are international student loans available from most colleges and universities, as long as you have a U.S. cosigner. And the best place to start, of course, is the site that I just showed you, www.internationalstudentloan.com. So now what we're going to do is just answer a few questions that you guys have been submitting. You can continue to submit those. We'll try to get to as many as we can. You can submit them on Twitter at #FinancialAidTalk, and we'll get to those as soon as we can. If we don't get to them today, we'll go ahead and post them on our social media channels. So, Jenny, you want to take over?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Victoria. We want to again thank you for attending our discussion on how to get an international student loan. We'll be holding our next webinar on March 6th on 8 steps to write a killer essay. So be sure to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Google+ to get more information on registration. Also, if you have ideas of a webinar that you want to see, let us know. Be sure to let us know through those different social media outlets, and we'll be taking feedback as we craft our upcoming webinars for your review. So we want to thank you all for submitting your questions, and I will try to get to as many as possible. If you do not see your question here, please check out social pages as we'll list the questions as well as additional resources. If you have any questions on terminology, again, if you go to the resource section of International Student Loan, you'll find that right there. So let's get straight to your questions. The first one, I do not know anyone in the U.S., and to get a loan, I need a cosigner. Is there or are there no alternatives? That is a great question. And the way these private student loans work is that they are non-collateral loans. And what that means is you're not putting up an actual asset like a car or a house. So these lenders require that you have someone in the U.S. that's basically signing on to the application with you, that in case you cannot actually pay the money back, that person will instead. So because of that, they do have to be a U.S. cosigner. So even if you are from another country and you have someone at home that will do that, they have to meet, as Brianna had mentioned, 3 requirements. They have to be a U.S. citizen or a U.S. green card holder. They have to have lived in the U.S. for the last 2 years, and they also have to have good credit. And that actually brings me to the next question. I have a U.S. cosigner, but they do not have good credit. Can I still apply? What happens is when you apply for an international student loan, you're going to put the cosigner information on there, and they're going to do a credit report and a credit check. So it's always a good idea if you're not completely sure to apply for the loan. What they'll do is they'll come back to you, they'll let you know whether you've been approved or not, and they'll also provide you with the terms and conditions. The cosigner is valuable because it really does affect the amount, the best interest rate that you'll get. So the better the credit is of your cosigner, the better your interest rate is going to be, the more favorable it's going to be. So if you are unhappy with the terms that you got, you can always find another cosigner instead. Let's see, we have another one here. What about loans for U.S. citizens studying abroad? That's a great question, and yes, we do offer, and there are study abroad loans. There are 2 different kinds of loans for U.S. citizens. One is a study abroad loan, and that would be if you are getting if you're going through a program in the U.S. and you're actually getting credit from that U.S. institution. As long as they're an approved school, then you are eligible. And like Victoria said, if you use that same tool on international student loan, you would select U.S. citizen and then you would be matched directly. The other kind of loan is foreign enrolled loan, and that would be if you're a U.S. citizen enrolling directly in a foreign school. And if that's the case, there are loans for you as well. So the best thing to do if you're not sure of your situation is to use that tool, because it takes all of that information, compiles it, and then matches you with those loans depending on whether you're studying abroad, whether you're an international student, or if you're a foreign enrolled student. Our next question comes, so do I ask for a student loan after I get the acceptance of the university? Another great question, and that actually comes up a lot. We get that question by email many times throughout the year. And really the answer is yes. You do have to be accepted by your university in order to apply for a student loan. And the reason for that is because student loans do have to get approved by your school, either your university or college. So you'll first need to figure out what school you're going to go to and that you've been accepted to, and then you can apply for that student loan. Sometimes, depending on the university, you may be able to apply for that loan, and you can use those funds to actually show proof of financial solvency. And what that's doing is stating that you have enough funds to pay for your full tuition. So that's another great question. You'll want to check with your financial aid office, as that can vary by school. We have another question about getting a cosigner, and the question is, how can I get a cosigner? Getting a cosigner for a lot of international students is difficult, especially if they don't have ties in the U.S. You would need to have a U.S. cosigner, as I mentioned before, and that can be a family member, it can be a friend, it can be a friend of a friend, basically anyone who meets the qualifications that is willing to sign your application. But keep in mind that it is a big undertaking for your cosigner, because they're essentially putting their credit on the line so that way you can get an international student loan. So when you approach them, make sure that you show them that you understand that and see whether they can help you. Unfortunately, cosigners in your home country will not work for these loans as these lenders do require them to be a U.S. cosigner. Okay. We have another question. What are the criteria for a cosigner? Criteria for a cosigner include 1, they must be a U.S. citizen or permanent resident, 2, that they've been in the U.S. for the last 2 years, and 3, that they have good credit. Okay. We have another question. I'd like to ask about what to get a grant for the preparation of a master's degree. What are the requirements? Grants are different than loans. The way to look at financial aid is there's many different sources of financial aid. There's scholarships, there's grants, there are a number of different awards that you can get, which are, as I had mentioned in earlier slides, those are typically funds that you get that you don't have to pay back. And because of that, it makes it very, very helpful because you get the money and then you can put it towards your education. And there are a number of different resources out there, one of which is IEFA.org, and there you can find a list of scholarships, grants, and fellowships. You may even be able to contact your university directly for different types of grants for mechanical engineering. But international student loans can also help you if you are already looking for financial aid and you've been accepted to a school, then you can apply for up to the total cost of your education. Okay, we have another question. Is there any cap to the amount a student can be offered for an international student loan? And the question to that is yes. Now the way that the loans work is that you can borrow up to the total cost of your education minus any other awards that you've received. So if you have, let's say, a scholarship, it would be financial aid subtracting your scholarship award. Now all of that is determined by your college or university. So if you're not sure what that capped amount is going to be, then we recommend talking to your financial aid office or even your international student advisor to find out what that total cost of education is. The reason is they want to make sure that you're only borrowing as much as you need. So that is the policy, and that's why your lender needs to work also with your school because the maximum amount of loans that you can get is actually certified by your college or university. We have another question here. From where are these loans coming? Is it from the U.S. government? Good question, and these are not from U.S. governments. They are from U.S. banks. As I mentioned on the first slide when we discussed the different types of student loans, there are federal loans, which are through the U.S. government, and then there are private student loans, which are typically done through banks. And federal aid, federal money is typically not able to be given to international students. So these are private banks that are working with international students and their college or university to provide these funds. Okay. We have another question. What if I do not have any aid or scholarships? If you do not have any aid or scholarships, that's fine. There's no requirement that you need to have a financial aid package or a scholarship in order to apply for international student loans. So you can actually apply up to the total cost of your education. Again, what you want to do is maximize if you have any savings or if you have any family income that you're going to put towards it. Make sure to consider that first before looking at the total cost of your the total cost that you want to borrow for your loans, as that'll impact how much you borrow. And again, how much you borrow, the time period in which you borrow, all of these can affect the interest rates. So you want to think about international student loans as covering the gap to really make sure that you're able to afford your education. Okay, I have another question here. Could you repeat the website you mentioned about grants? Yes, the website is IEFA.org. Again, that's I for international, E for education, F for financial, A for aid.org. And there you can search. We actually had a webinar last month where we discussed scholarships. So if that's something that you want to hear in our future presentation, make sure to let us know on Twitter, Facebook, or Google+. That way we can make sure that we get all your questions answered. And we have one last question that I'll take, and the rest of them we will put through our social pages. The last question is, how long does it take to repay a loan? And that is an excellent question, and that's going to depend on the loan that you choose. So there are a number of different lenders that you may be eligible for, and your repayment can start right away, or it could start right after you finish your school, and it can go for as long as the term of the agreement is. Now obviously if you have a longer period in which to repay the loans, your interest rate is going to be higher. So if you want the lowest interest rate, it's always better to repay it as soon as possible in the shortest amount of time possible. But obviously you have to look at your pocketbook and make sure that you have the ability to make the payments. A good thing to do before choosing your international student loan is to do the calculation beforehand. Make sure you know how much you're going to pay per month, when the payment's going to start, and that you have the ability, you have a source of funds in order to give the money back. So with that, we want to thank you all for coming and attending our presentation on how to get an international student loan. We hope that you all found it helpful. Again, if you have any questions, please let us know. We will be on Twitter this afternoon answering all of your questions, so we will continue this offline through Twitter. If you don't use Twitter, we'll also be checking Facebook and Google+. So keep in touch and look out for our next webinar. Thank you all for